She tried to discredit him on live TV. His response. It changed everything. The email arrived late in the afternoon, a formal invitation from the producers of The Morning Exchange, one of the country's most watched talk shows. They wanted Darius Bell, tech entrepreneur and CEO of Innovis, to join a segment on diversity in business. Darius had seen this play out before. Mainstream platforms suddenly discovering black entrepreneurs, giving them a few minutes of applause before moving on to the next trending topic. But this time felt different. Innovis wasn't just any startup, it had recently secured a multi-million-dollar defense contract, outbidding industry titans. That wasn't luck, it was the result of 2 decades of relentless work. Still, something about the request unsettled him. "You sure about this?" his assistant, Tasha, asked, noticing his hesitation. "You know how these shows operate. They love a success story, but tearing one down. They love that even more." Darius leaned back, contemplative. "I'll handle it. Besides, it's national exposure. Let's see what they want." Tasha exhaled sharply. "Just don't let them bait you." He nodded, though deep down, he recognized the game. If it was a setup, they were playing chess with the wrong opponent. The morning of the interview, Darius arrived at KXN Studios in Los Angeles. The green room was sterile and cold. A young producer greeted him with a clipped, "Mr. Bell, we'll mic you up in 5. No small talk, no warm-up, just in and out, like a transaction." As he sat in the makeup chair, an assistant dusted his face with disinterest. On a nearby monitor, The Morning Exchange aired live, a panel discussing celebrity scandals, followed by a cooking demo. Then a transition card flashed, "Coming up next, the black tech boom, talent or special treatment." Darius clenched his jaw. So that was the angle. If they thought they had the upper hand, they were in for a surprise. The set was designed to look inviting, soft blues and golds, a glass coffee table between the host's chair and the guests. Cameras hovered silently, ready to capture every nuance. Darius adjusted his suit jacket as he sat across from Madeline Royce, the show's lead anchor. A seasoned journalist known for tough questions, Madeline smiled warmly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Darius Bell," she began, her voice polished and poised. "CEO of Innovis. A true American success story." Darius returned a polite nod. "Appreciate you having me." Madeline leaned in, flipping through her cue cards. "Let's dive right in. Your company recently landed a $200 million government contract, outbidding some of the biggest names in tech. That's impressive." He knew the setup, build him up before the takedown. Keeping his tone measured, he replied, "It was a long process, but we put in the work. We developed a security encryption system that outperformed our competitors. Simple as that." Madeline crossed her legs, her expression sharpening. "Some have called it groundbreaking." A pause. "But others have raised questions." Darius remained still. "Questions?" She glanced at her notes. "Some industry experts suggest Innovis benefited from federal diversity incentives. That these programs give companies like yours an edge, not because you're the best, but to meet quotas." There it was. Darius let the silence linger before responding. "Funny how that works. When a black entrepreneur succeeds, it's special treatment. But when legacy firms run by the same families for generations land the same deals, no one questions it." The studio air thickened. Off camera, producers exchanged glances. Madeline pressed on. "So you're saying race played no role in your success?" Darius chuckled, shaking his head. "Let me ask you this, when SpaceX won NASA contracts, was it because Elon Musk met a diversity quota? When Jeff Bezos secured government deals for Blue Origin, was it because of his background? Or do we only ask that question when the CEO looks like me?" Madeline's expression barely shifted. "You don't believe these programs help?" "They level the playing field," Darius replied. "But let's not forget, the playing field was never level to begin with. Madeline's smile turned sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "Let's talk about that playing field," she said, her tone cooling. "You grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Single mother, public school. Worked your way up from nothing. It's inspiring." Darius nodded slowly, sensing where this was headed. "But here's the question," she continued. "How does someone with no Ivy League degree or deep family connections go from a struggling neighborhood to securing contracts billion-dollar corporations couldn't land?" The implication hung in the air. "How did you get here? Did someone pull strings?" Darius tilted his head, considering his response. "It's called work, Madeline. Some of us don't have generational wealth or country club networks to lean on. So we build from the ground up." Madeline's expression remained polite, but the steel in her eyes was unmistakable. "Surely you had help along the way," she prodded. "A mentor, a program, something that gave you an extra push." Darius exhaled quietly. "Help? Sure. It came in the form of working 3 jobs while getting my engineering degree. It came in the form of sleeping in my office because I couldn't afford rent. That's the help I got." Behind the cameras, producers leaned in, riveted. Madeline's voice softened, though her words cut deeper. "Still, some argue that black entrepreneurs today have more opportunities than ever. Programs like affirmative action, minority business grants, and government incentives exist to open doors that weren't open before." Darius leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You know what's funny? When a black business owner succeeds, people always ask which programs helped us. But no one asks which old money bank funded a white-owned startup. No one questions which family connections got them into Stanford or which golf buddy invested in their company." He let the silence linger for a moment, letting his words take root. Then, he continued, his tone calm but deliberate. "The truth is, success isn't handed out like some lottery prize. People like me have to be twice as good just to get a seat at the table." A noticeable shift rippled through the room. The tension wasn't just discomfort, it was the weight of an audience realizing they were witnessing something real. Madeline, however, didn't flinch. She smiled the kind of smile a chess player gives when they think they've cornered their opponent. "That's an interesting perspective," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "But let's talk about perception." Turning slightly toward the cameras, she continued, "Darius, you present yourself as a self-made success. But let's address the public perception of your story. Some say black entrepreneurs get an unfair advantage in media attention, that the narrative of overcoming struggle is more marketable than the stories of thousands of white business owners who work just as hard but don't get the same headlines." Darius chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "Oh, so now we get too much attention." Madeline's smile remained, but a subtle shift in her posture betrayed her surprise. She wasn't expecting him to laugh. "You're telling me," he continued, "that in a world where 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, where the majority of tech funding still goes to white-owned startups, my success is the problem because it gets too much press." Madeline tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, regaining her composure. "I'm just pointing out that, in today's climate, some feel there's pressure to highlight diversity over pure merit." "Merit, right?" Darius said, exhaling. He glanced briefly at the cameras before locking eyes with her. "Let me ask you something, Madeline. Do you really think that if I weren't exceptional at what I do, I'd be sitting in this chair right now?" Madeline opened her mouth but didn't respond fast enough. "You think I got here because I played the diversity card? Or do you think I got here despite a system designed to keep me out?" The silence in the room was palpable, heavier than any of her previous questions. But Madeline wasn't finished. She had one last card to play, the one she believed would break him. She drew a slow breath, adjusting her posture just enough to seem casual, but Darius saw through it. "Darius," she began, her voice softening for effect, "I think it's fair to say you're passionate about this, and I respect that. But let me ask you, do you think some of this outrage is exaggerated?" She let the words hang in the air. "After all, your success story proves the system isn't as stacked against black entrepreneurs as some claim. Darius felt the heat rise in him but didn't show it. Instead, he chuckled again, shaking his head. You know, he said, his voice measured, it's funny how people love to use one success story as proof that a problem doesn't exist. Madeline's smile faltered, just for a second. Let me put it this way, Darius continued, leaning forward slightly. If one person climbs out of a burning building, do you point at them and say, see? The fire wasn't that bad. Madeline hesitated, her mouth opening slightly before closing again. The fact that I made it doesn't mean the system isn't broken, he said. It just means I fought twice as hard to get through it. The studio crew was frozen. Even the faint shuffle of feet off camera had stopped. Madeline adjusted in her seat, reaching for control. I understand your perspective, she said, her voice adopting a carefully neutral tone. But let's consider another side of this. Some might say your frustration isn't about race but about resentment toward larger corporations. After all, you've publicly criticized big tech companies for not hiring more diverse executives. Resentment? Darius tilted his head. No. Accountability? Absolutely. Madeline pressed her lips together, clearly deciding her next move. What do you say to those who believe that, in today's economy, success is based on hard work, not race? Darius exhaled through his nose, locking eyes with her. I say, he began, his voice firm but steady, people love to believe in fairy tales when they're the ones benefiting from them. The silence that followed was louder than anything said before. But let's be real, he continued. Black entrepreneurs still get denied loans at twice the rate of white business owners. We still receive less than 2% of venture capital funding, and even when we prove ourselves, we're still asked if we deserve our success. Madeline sat still, listening but not truly hearing. So let's stop pretending the system isn't rigged, Darius said, his tone unwavering. It is. And the only people who don't see it are the ones it works for. The silence that followed wasn't discomfort, it was impact. Madeline shifted slightly, for the first time looking genuinely uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to speak, but Darius wasn't done. You know what the real problem is, he said, leaning back and exhaling slowly. Madeline hesitated. What? The bar isn't in the same place for everyone, Darius replied. Her posture stiffened. Meaning? Meaning, Darius said, a mediocre white man can fail upwards in this country, but a brilliant black man has to jump through flaming hoops just to get a shot. A muffled curse came from the control room. They knew this moment was going viral. A white CEO can bankrupt a company, lay off thousands, and somehow get hired somewhere else, Darius continued. Meanwhile, a black CEO has one bad quarter, and it's suddenly proof we weren't ready for leadership. Madeline opened her mouth again, but Darius wasn't finished. And the best part, he said, his voice tinged with dry humor. When we actually make it, people like you sit across from us and ask if we got here because of some special advantage. Silence. Madeline's jaw tightened, subtle but caught on camera. Darius leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just final. You wanted to talk about fairness? He chuckled bitterly. Then let's start by telling the truth. The studio seemed to hold its breath, every word hanging in the charged air. Madeline's polished demeanor had cracked. For once, it wasn't just the audience watching Darius, it was everyone in the room. It was the entire country now. Darius Bell, the tech mogul who once built software prototypes in a cramped studio apartment, stared directly into the camera, his voice calm but cutting. I know what some of you are thinking right now, he said, his tone steady. Some of you are nodding because you've lived this, you've seen it. And some of you are sitting there, arms crossed, frowning, telling yourself this isn't real. That I'm just playing the victim. That it's all in my head. He paused, letting the silence stretch, his gaze unwavering. But deep down, you know I'm right. The studio air seemed to hold its breath. No one moved, no one dared to. And then, from off-camera, the producer's voice crackled through the speakers. "All right, we need to take a quick break." Madeline Royce, ever the polished anchor, forced a smile. "We'll be back with more after this." The cameras cut, but the damage was already done. Within an hour, the exchange was everywhere, clips flooding social media like a tidal wave. By the time Darius slid into his car, his phone was buzzing with missed calls, text messages, and a deluge of notifications. Twitter was on fire. Darius Bell just exposed the media's bias on live TV. This was powerful. #TruthHurts. The way he looked into the camera and called out America, chills. Darius Bell was right. But not everyone agreed. Here we go again. Another successful guy pretending to be oppressed. Cry me a river. Stop the victim mindset. Merit matters. Cable news picked up the story before lunchtime. On one end, he was heralded as a hero, a voice of truth in a fractured system. On the other, he was derided as combative, arrogant, and divisive. The Morning Exchange released a carefully worded statement. "We value open dialogue and diverse perspectives. While today's discussion became more intense than expected, we stand by our commitment to fair conversations." Darius read it aloud to his assistant, Tasha, a wry grin tugging at his lips. "Fair, huh?" Tasha, scrolling through emails, half laughed, half sighed. "Do you realize you just set the internet on fire?" He rubbed his temples. "Wasn't exactly my plan." "Well, congratulations. You're officially the most talked about entrepreneur in America." Not all attention was welcome, though. Praise came hand in hand with backlash. A major corporate partner pulled out of a deal, citing the need to reevaluate their commitments. Emails poured in, some supportive, others venomous. One unmarked package, left at Innovis headquarters, contained only a single sheet of paper with the word "enough" scrawled in bold letters. Tasha frowned as she read the message. "You need security." Darius exhaled, leaning back in his chair. He had known this was coming. Speaking out as a black man, unapologetically, always came at a cost. But backing down? That was never an option. The next day, the storm had escalated. Opinion pieces flooded the internet, each taking a side: Fox News, Darius Bell, the new face of corporate entitlement. CNN, a reckoning for America's meritocracy. Business Insider, what Darius Bell's interview reveals about race and success. Meanwhile, Madeline Royce was in damage control mode. On her show the next morning, she delivered a carefully rehearsed response: "I respect Mr. Bell and his accomplishments, but I stand by my questions. My job as a journalist is to ask what the audience is thinking. If my questions were uncomfortable, that only proves how necessary they were." Darius watched the segment from his office, shaking his head. "Fair, huh?" he muttered again. Tasha walked in, holding a folder. "We just got an offer." "From who?" She set the folder on his desk. "A network. They want you to do a televised special. One-on-one. A deep dive about race, business, and the system." Darius raised an eyebrow. "So now they want to listen." "Seems like it," Tasha said with a smirk. Then, after a beat, "What do you want to do?" He leaned back in his chair, staring at the folder. He could walk away, let the noise die down, and return to business as usual. Or he could use this moment, not for clout, not for attention, but to say the things no one wanted to hear. Darius picked up the folder, skimming its contents. He set it down with a finality that echoed his decision. "Tell them I'll do it." Tasha blinked. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah. But on my terms." Because if the system was going to put him under a spotlight, he was damn sure going to control the narrative. Darius Bell's viral moment wasn't just another internet controversy. It was a reckoning, a long overdue conversation about race, success, and the double standards baked into the foundation of the system. Some called him a disruptor. Others called him arrogant. Many called him right. But one thing was clear, no one could ignore him anymore. What about you? Does success mean playing by the rules of a broken system, or rewriting the rules entirely? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe.